regardless of where you're working at this moment, figuring out how you can create workplace wellness for yourself and for your team is going to be important regardless of your industry.
Welcome to the In Crowd, where we interview experts in the film, TV, and advertising world. Today, I am joined by Dr. Alexis Moreno. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lillian Isabella. Dr. Alexis Moreno, I'm going to do a quick little introduction of you. PsyD MS MA is the CEO, consulting psychologist, and health correspondent for Wit and Reason, a media consulting practice in Washington, D.C. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you spending some time with me too.
So there's so many endless numbers of topics that we could cover, but we have a limited amount of time, so I'll try and be concise about it. But I think let's start at the beginning. What kind of like began your journey with psychology? How did you first get interested in that?
Yeah, in college, I had a sociology requirement to do some community service, and I found myself working at a domestic violence shelter in San Pedro, California. That volunteer opportunity required me to do like 40 hours of really intensive training to learn more about like the mental health needs and psychological treatment for survivors of domestic violence and their children. And from that point on, I realized I wanted to do more than just, journalism and raising awareness and helping to advocate, but then also to get an even deeper understanding of human being psychology and effective treatments at a community and an even bigger societal level.
What do you think the implications are of having, mental health for society? Like what are the implications of a society that doesn't engage with it and that kind of lets it slide under the rug? And then what's the impact that the work you do has or that you hope that it has in an ideal scenario?
I appreciate that question so much. It's really concerning when you no longer see these types of realities in the news. Because if it's no longer making news, it means that it's no longer newsworthy. It's no longer new. And so when we have issues like domestic violence, for example, or issues with even just being able for people to connect to treatment, and that's not making headline news, it's almost become normalized. Like that's the acceptable standard, and we're no longer talking about it because that's the norm. So continuing to talk up mental health and mental health well-being and connecting people to services and providing interventions both at the individual, family, couple, community, societal level is going to be really crucial to our success.
Definitely. And then you kind of arced into a very specific focus on like media, film, production worlds, and the psychology and mental wellness in those areas. You specifically were noticing from a young age the way that media impacted people. Like when children relate to each other, they're modeling kind of things they see in media. So was that like the genesis of your curiosity around the dance between media and psychology, or how did that kind of braid together into your current focus?
Yeah, my younger sibling will tell you that even at a very young age, I was like, "Don't watch those cartoons; they're too violent." And you get really rowdy after you watch like Bugs Bunny and like, I don't know, these other characters like run around chasing after each other. The research is out though that just because we're reviewing some or even kids, just because they're viewing it doesn't automatically equal causality of like violent behaviors or anything. Same goes for video games. It is interesting though to see how media does impact us on like a general level, and what kind of characters we relate to, if there are characters we can relate to, can be very powerful. Media can be both a reflection of our experience and also like the fantasy of of how we want to evolve and what kind of society we want to be.
Yeah, and also like you said something very telling, which was, or do you see yourself at all? And I think that can have an effect on mental health too. If you're not seeing like a representation of you or your family or the way you grew up, it can really affect you.
Yes, and I'm just so I mean, like, I'm an older millennial, and so growing up, we didn't see a whole lot of representation. I mean, even just to see someone with, like, curly hair, on screen was, like, unheard of, um, let alone people with, different skin colors and complexions and sizes and age and abilities. It's just pretty incredible for me now to kind of observe media and how far we've come. This is coming from advocacy across the board, from cast and crew to to casting to writers to even authors and books that then become movies. It's pretty incredible how much progress we've made. And it's just so sweet to see also in social media the younger ones reacting to seeing a black princess, and saying like, "Look, that's me," and then and then they get to dress up in the same costume, or seeing themselves as a superhero. That's stuff that we didn't get when we were younger. These are older generations, so I think we're going in the right direction for sure.
I love that. I think that's true. And so there's that public facing, what everybody's seeing in the output or the product, for lack of a better word, that we're creating in film, TV media. But then there's also behind the scenes and there's the dynamics on set and all those things. So I think you work a bit in that realm of trying to help people make sure that, mental health is considered. Tell us a little more about the work you do behind the scenes on sets and with production companies and with people who are creating the art that we like to watch.
Yeah, and we definitely still need to see more representation and more diversity, not only in front of the camera, but even especially behind the camera. There are some definite unique challenges to the production workplace in comparison to others. Because of that, it definitely requires some extra care and attention to making sure that everyone, cast and crew, um, are not only safe, both physically and psychologically, but are also feeling comfortable.
Absolutely. I think that's 1000% true. And there's all different ways that people are trying to make things safer, right? Like from having intimacy coordinators to I mean, unions have their rules and guidelines for all that as well. The Me Too movement also super instrumental. What does your company do to try and help augment and support the work that these workplaces are doing to make things safer?
We describe it as working from pre-production all the way to post. And so in pre-production, we help with even just reviewing scripts and making sure, especially if it's mental health content or sensitive subject matter, making sure that it's either accurate or safe, for the consumer, for their target audience, trying to help studios and companies prevent issues from coming out later on down the line as much as possible. And then even looking at their scheduling for the day. Like, is this reasonable and feasible? Like, are they going to be able to carry out this type of work? Trying to prevent a lot of the issues that may happen during production. And then during production, we're there on set. And so I would typically work as like a mental health coordinator, alongside the safety team, which comprises like your medics and your ICs, your intimacy coordinators. Having a good team like that, where you have at least those three professionals, keeping an eye on the cast and crew, making sure that everyone's safe, and the environment as well, making sure that everyone's safe. It's pretty solid. My goal as well is also to get as many cast and crew trained in production mental health first aid. So that way we have as many people on set with the same understanding of what they're looking out for when it comes to mental health concerns. And that could even be like substance abuse or suicidal ideation or concerns. And then how to effectively intervene, safely and effectively intervene. So that way we're not just hoping that one person can keep an eye on like a crew of, hundreds, but that everyone's on the same page on how to support one another and create that like actually safe and psychologically well culture there on set. And then post production, we help with any kind of debriefing things, especially for like reality shows where there's like an intense competition. There's a lot writing on it, or if as people need to kind of like process what they just went through, we're there for debriefing as well in post production.
So many things I want to say to you right now. But just real quick, reality shows. So I have been hearing this like kind of being more of a thing that reality TV show producers and companies are providing mental health services to the people who participated in the reality show series. Just recently, they're starting to do this because there's a lot of bullying that can happen online, and there's a lot of chaos that can come from what people are just seeing as a snippet of the reality TV show and not having the context, and them kind of painting certain people to be villains and all this kind of narrative stuff that winds up having a really big impact on the participants mental health wise. So that's really interesting. Are you involved in that world at all as well? It sounds like maybe you are.
Yes, yes, definitely. And I'm so glad you brought up social media too, because that adds like a whole extra layer of psychological concerns after not just during post production, but after something has been broadcasted, and you have everyone giving opinions of the edited cuts of like what they saw put together of the character that you were portrayed to be. So working with people and and helping them kind of navigate um in some cases like this new reality for them. Imagine someone who's vulnerable enough to go onto a reality show and how that might impact every aspect of their life. Yeah, that's definitely something that we help with because it can be exceptionally challenging.
So I don't know if you've started to think in this way yet. I'm sure you have, but I'm curious. And if you don't have something you want to share today about it, that's totally fine. But I'm very curious about like the impact that artificial intelligence is going to have on all of this and on mental health. And once you're a public figure, there are some public figures who are starting to sue different companies for using their voice. Like I think Scarlett Johansson recently sued a company because they had made a voice that sounded exactly like hers, and I believe she won. But like there's this thing that's starting to happen where people are creating product using a voice or an image that is not theirs, and it is a real person. And so the psychological impact of that as well, and like navigating mental health in the world of AI, where we already kind of believe everything is true that you see online as far as narratives around reality TV. I think a lot of people tend to be like, oh, that's how that person is type thing. So artificial intelligence and mental health. Is there a conversation to even have there yet? I mean, is it too early, or what do you think?
I mean that's what the big strikes were for what year are we in now? For like 2023. You know, both Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA, it's already incredibly competitive, and there's a lot of sense of scarcity when it just comes to competing with other humans. Now trying to compete with AI. So it is a concern, absolutely, that we're all still advocating for and fighting for our human bodily rights. And
Autonomy, right? It's like a kind of a form of autonomy, like.
yeah, and consent and exploitation. It's like a whole thing.
Mhm.
So many layers to it. But this is also it's already so mainstream that we are already considering it even just for like the average child these days.
Wow, scary. But also, so a little background about Diagonal Media. So we're a creative agency, and we focus a lot on video production. And our founder and CEO, Blake Drummond, started the company because he was in the video production world. So he was working on some pretty big TV productions and sets, and the environment was kind of not conducive to like healthy living. It was really long hours. It was like a lot of chaotic energy. And so it just didn't feel right or sit right. And so he decided to found his own company. And one of the most important things is like, having a healthy work-life balance and making sure that, there's support and someone can take a day off or a vacation, no problem, because there's enough of a team supporting to allow that to happen. And so that's something that's like very core to the foundation of Diagonal Media is mental health, really, and being able to have that balance. So I love hearing you say that that's something you're really focused on, is helping to support that on set. Would you say you have an example of a story where you came in and no names, no production names, no actor, nothing like that, but do you have a story of an instance where you felt you were really able to make a difference, where you came in and something was happening that didn't feel right, and then you were able to kind of rectify or correct the situation?
You never really know who's going to be impacted by a production. And even if a production company comes in with the concern of like cast, like let's say it's like a reality show, and they're like, okay, we're really concerned about we're here's a scenario that's going to be played out. We're really concerned about like the cast well-being while they're being challenged in this way. Um, and so we need you, on call watching and making sure everything's okay just in case anything happens or anyone has like a reaction. And then what ended up happening though, um A cast member was a little frazzled and did end up disclosing that they have a mental health condition that they were being treated for. Um, so naturally, I get to also consult, with their consent, get to consult with their therapist and let them know, like, what's been going on and like how we can navigate this as like a team together. The interesting part about this, though, that it wasn't just the cast members, but it was also the crew that were closely watching and monitoring and really sincerely caring for the cast involved. And through that care and attention, they some of the crew also ended up getting impacted by the specific scene or the specific challenge. And that
Mhm.
was completely unexpected for everybody. From my position, I realize that there's also like vicarious trauma. This wasn't a traumatic situation, but we can all be triggered and we don't necessarily know when or by what we would be triggered by. It was coming from a really beautiful place that the crew was concerned about the cast, and we also had to make sure that the crew was also fine in that process of caring for the cast and making sure that they were well. You end up working on different levels and with different people across the room, not just the people who are under the spotlight, but also the people who are behind the scenes, wanting to make sure um, that the production goes well and that people are safe. And then we also have to also take care of the people who are the caretakers in that sense.
That's incredible. And it sounds like what you're doing is really like kind of busting mental health stigma wide open. This is a question I have for you is like, what can everybody do? Because I've been going to therapy for many years and I'm super happy to say that. I love therapy. I think everybody should go to therapy. It's something that allows you to understand yourself, understand your mind, your psychology, and like you said, if you're not talking about things, then it's like, oh, normal or accepted. But really, I think there's no such thing as normal. Like everybody's brain works slightly differently, everybody's psychology is slightly different. And so if you assume there's a normal, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage. And I think it's so important to understand your mind and understand how your past influences your present and all this stuff. And clearly you do because this is your whole profession. But I have a question, which is, how do each of us, in our own way, help bust through mental health stigma? Because I think it's one of the most pernicious things that exists. So how do each of us do it? Not just if in the work you do, but like on an individual, personal level.
Yeah, and I appreciate you so much for being open about your mental health, experiences. And the reality is that like yes, therapy and mental health is beneficial for everyone because we are imperfect human beings raised by imperfect human beings for generations upon generations in an imperfect society. you know, we also need to prepare people for this new culture, and that's where it could get really tricky in the workplace because we have older generations that weren't raised that way, and then you have younger generations coming in that were raised to just be open and authentic and sincere. And then we experience a bit of a clash where, and not just in age, even just across cultures, where one might not know how to, respond to another person being so open, or they might not be at that same level yet because they haven't it's really a privilege, they haven't had that privilege. Talking it up, normalizing it, validating the fact that we're all human and we're all on a spectrum in every way possible, um, and and really showing that care and compassion just like you would for any kind of medical, concerns or even just like basic medical checkups. I mean, you don't have to go to a hospital to know that you need to meet with a doctor, right?
Hmm. So, are there any techniques that you might have for people in our industry who are working in production, whether it might be breathing techniques or any kind of thing to kind of center themselves and, get into a mental health zone, for lack of a better phrase?
What I highly recommend are to focus on building and nurturing your support systems. There are things you could do on your own. And fortunately, with apps and YouTube and podcasts, and even just like yoga studios, it's pretty accessible these days. Find your supportive people who understand the type of work you do, understand the industry, the politics, and people that you can trust and that you could confide in that aren't, competing with you or aren't gonna try to discourage you from pursuing your dreams and passions, but people that just get it. That's gonna make such a big benefit to your mental health and well-being.
Are there any parallels between the corporate world and the film world as far as mental health and practices and considerations?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Especially especially working I work a lot with, like, pretty high pressured jobs, Fortune 500 companies, a lot of tech. There, it's very pressured as well. Post COVID, the demands to be on call and to always have a computer and to always be on and working nonstop is similar to working on a production where there are very long, exhaustive hours, and you always feel like you're on. It can be very draining. And then also the politics that could come up, the relational dynamics, some personality clashes, all of that is still very similar. So we do see that across the board. Coming from LA, very familiar with film and television industries, and then I had moved to DC to finish my doctorate, and then worked with a lot of people in politics and military as well. People who worked on the Hill. You also see the same dynamics there.
Mm.
So, regardless of where you're working at this moment, figuring out how you can create workplace wellness for yourself and for your team is going to be important regardless of your industry.
Tell us how we can like stay in touch with you, how people could reach out to you if they want extra support, and yeah, how do people stay connected?
Yes, I appreciate this question so much. DC radio health talk show called Wit and Reason with Dr. Alexis, and I bring in other creatives and other health professionals as well to talk about to talk in more detail about all of these things that we've been talking here today on this show. All over social media at Wit and Reason, um, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And then, of course, you can access me and our services at witandreason.com.
Amazing. Thank you. Are there any mental health myths that you see either like in the film production world or the corporate world? There's a laugh, so I know that that's a yes.
Yep, of course. All the cliche things that people say if a person does disclose like, "Oh, I'm feeling anxious, or I'm struggling with anxiety, or I'm going through a depressive episode," the default responses are like, "Oh, it's okay, you'll be fine." They're all, like, very simplistic, and it's laughable because it's like, "Dude, if I broke my ankle, you wouldn't just be like, just get up and start walking again, like, you'll be fine," like, or just drink some water, like, what are we doing? It's 2024, why are we still doing this? So I think, like, the big myth would be that mental health isn't a real thing and that there isn't, like, an actual, like, biological, physiological experience that people are having and that it's all within their control.
Have there been any changes that surprised you in the industry? You know, you have a lot of experience with things that could happen on set that deal with mental health and supporting in that way, but is there anything that surprised even you? Was there anything that you were kind of like, whoa, what?
Um, I think the biggest surprise for me over the years in a good way, um, and it's so impactful that, like, I could feel myself almost, like, getting flushed and tearing up. It is how responsive everyone was to the Me Too movement when it got through and everyone outside it's like and I talk to people too about it to this day, and it's like, it's something we all knew was happening to the point where we even had, like, really, like, unfortunate humor about it, or, joking about the casting couch a and so it was so, like, oddly normalized, and finally, for the reporter and for everyone who came out, in the article and who stood up against, all of the powers putting their whole careers on the line. It's an incredibly risky thing to do, and all of the support that came from everybody across the world. in every industry ever. And that was just such a pivotal moment that even today allows me to do the work that I'm doing. Like I doubt I would have been able to be as influential in film and television bringing mental health here if the Me Too movement would have never happened.
So you brought up something really important. You said that it was even normalized, right? Sexual harassment was normalized on set, the casting couch and all that kind of thing. And earlier in our conversation, you mentioned how the most dangerous thing is when something's normalized, when it's no longer news or newsworthy. How do you have achieve that transformation where you go from something being normalized that is actually very problematic and that needs to change to there being mass movement, mass change, and bringing something to light and kind of having catharsis and change, real change happen? What is that inflection point? Like, how do you instigate that? How does that happen?
Yeah, and it definitely doesn't happen overnight. Like Me Too movement happened, everyone's talking about social media. It didn't happen like as quickly as a post would happen. Like Me Too, hashtag Me Too. Even though socially we were talking about it internally, we're still working on it within each of these systems. And it's something that we talk about in our anti-sexual harassment training that we offer in partnership with Cintima, who also does intimacy coordinator training. But for cast and crew, for production specific anti-sexual harassment, it has to be a multifaceted, multi-level approach. We also do bystander training, and we cannot count on just bystanders to speak up or for victims to speak up. No, this has to be all the way top down and through every single person, and every single department has to be on the same page as far as what the standards are and what are the effective best practices for policies and procedures if and when something happens. It definitely takes a lot, and it's a all hands approach. It can't just be the select few that think that this is important. This has to be a whole cultural shift.
Yeah, so it's to be more collectivist in the way that we approach things and the way we're responsible to each other as well as ourselves. So that's what I'm hearing. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Alexis. You are definitely a member of the in crowd, and thank you for the extremely important work that you're doing on set and within corporate offices, production offices. You are making a difference, and thank you.
Thank you so much.